Hey, you guys, do you hear that noise? It sort of sounds like maybe crickets chirping? Or maybe it's the sound of like metal gears grinding against each other? No, that's not it. Maybe it's the sound of a sonic weapon. In 2016, over 20 American diplomats in Havana, Cuba became very sick because of a noise. Not just any noise, but a noise that reportedly made them lose their hearing, their cognitive functions, and even led to permanent brain injury. Not just any noise, but a noise that no one else on the entire island of Cuba but these few people could hear. Not just any noise, but a weapon. My name is Marie Mayhew, and my new podcast will examine what happened in Havana 2016 that led up to these 20-some odd people becoming ill. We will look at Cuba and the American history, the people involved, the possible scientific cause of this mystery, both the incredible myth and the even weirder truth. So that noise you hear, if we strip away the impossible, whatever remains may be what and who caused it. Join me on the Whatever Remains podcast for Season 1, Sonic Attack, coming in May, available wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. So, keep listening. Nice.
Sweet!
Nice.
Tell you what, Marie, getting a bit of pushback on Twitter about the Bruce Springsteen comments one of the hosts might have made.
That you hated the boss? You mean those comments?
Yeah, those ones.
Oh, okay, because I know they didn't come from me. I mean, I'm all about Bruce Springsteen. Can't stop the fire.
Yeah.
Without a spark, is gone for high. I love him. Come on, he's Jersey, man. Why? What are people saying? People are saying that you're a commie pinko scum.
Something like that. Anyways, no, good friend of the show. Rob is just giving me a little bit of little bit of ribbon on Twitter here, which is totally good. That is Rob Deemy. Thanks so much for following the show so much. Good fan. One of our earliest fans. It's killing. The guy's great. So awesome.
And clearly superior music taste.
All right, dear listeners, today's episode we are doing Economic Collapse.
Okay, and the E Street Band, amazing musicians, amazing. Even if you don't like Springsteen's music, if you step back and look at like kind of his general, like the scope of his work and the musicians he's worked in and the influence he's had as from where he came from and kind of how he got started and what he did, it's pretty amazing. What are we talking about again?
I don't remember. We're on part 3 of Economic Collapse. This is the final episode on Economic Collapse, listeners.
Yes.
So today's episode, we're going to talk about some crazy stuff. We're going to talk about how the economic collapse is coming. So get ready for that. And we're going to talk about how to prepare for it more efficiently than you might be doing currently.
Balance your checkbook. I'm joking. Nobody has a checkbook anymore.
No, hide your gold. All right, let's
bury your gold like pirates.
Let's get into it. All right, Marie. So, okay.
That's the big takeaway.
That is the big takeaway. Bury your gold like a pirate.
Bury your gold like a pirate.
We all eventually become pirates again. So, last episode, we got up to the point. Basically, we got up to the point where the disparity in wealth and economic problems had gotten so bad that we decided to overthrow the regimes of like all of our countries.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And
it was such an either, I want to say oligarch, which I think is right, like, or a monarchy. And people were
so poor. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so one of the really important, and this is actually going to be what we see happen. Like, that's really the story of the Soviet Union as well, is, when the monarchies that didn't get turned over during this first kind of wave, which kind of kicks off with the American Revolution in 1776, then the French Revolution shortly thereafter, those two kicked it off, and the monarchies that remained after that, the English monarchy, the German, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire monarchy, and the Russian monarchy, all kind of had their own fallings over time that basically are still the ripple effects that we're dealing with in the modern day, right? So the end of the Russian monarchy brought us communism in the Soviet Union, which was their own response to those economic disparities. Whereas in America and in France, America more so than France, let's say, America decided to go for kind of an all-out like capitalist system over a monarchy. France sort of went towards capitalism, but then kind of back towards another kind of monarchy or a military leadership government, then back to all kinds of weird stuff, whatever. The French Revolution, the American Revolution are both way complicated. But you see, like, the English monarchy is still around, but basically have no power, really. Besides
figureheads.
Yeah, besides the power of, like, fashion and, whatever. They have no...
Cold. Cold. And again, this is gonna go down like Bruce Springsteen, man. I'm giving you a chance now. But I will say, so I'm not a big fan of like the British monarchy, but Prince Harry marrying Meghan, I can't even remember her last name. I was like, that's an amazing, like, that's a great story. And again, it's sort of like the monarchy coming into the post-colonial, post sort of almost post-industrial world, and him marrying this commoner American divorced minority is crazy and is amazing and is such a good, like, to me, I'm like, oh, that's good. That's good for them. I mean, granted, they're figureheads, they're cultural figureheads, they're significant still, but I hear you. They don't really hold the same sway over, well, we say that, but the queen meets on a regular basis with all the prime ministers. She's probably kind of still heavily, it's kind of, has her fingers on the scale of what's going on, right?
It's sort of the only one that's still a thing, right? In any kind of way,
with any kind of serious weight to it.
All the other monarchies have fallen away, right? But in the wake of those falling outs, we have these big changes. So we're mostly talking about America here, just because that's kind of where our show comes from, right? But if you look,
Russia was bloody.
Russia was
so bloody.
Russia was very. I mean, we were bloody too, but it's a different kind of bloody. We didn't have like gulags and, you know what I mean. Like,
I would say, we were bloody. France was bloody, but Russia just was like, they had that little soupçon more bloodiness, violence to it.
Yeah. And you see that, though, too, with even, say, in some ways, the end of German imperialism led to World War II, right? Led to the rise of fascism in Germany.
The assassination of our Archduke.
Right.
Archduke Ferdinand.
Right. So these revolutions are not, they're still happening. And we still see them even in the modern day, where these economic conditions lead to problems like, say, terrorism, which then leads to ultimately, in the best case, revolution and then democratization. But in the worst cases, it leads to just kind of sectarian strife and terrorism generally, right?
Which is how some other countries would define democracy.
Right. Yes. Right? So the United States' economic policies really kind of start with a guy named Adam Smith. Now, Adam Smith was he's a very, very famous Scottish economist and philosopher. And his primarily the most important book that he wrote in many people's minds is The Wealth of Nations. Now, here's a kind of a quote that I think really, I think this is a good way to kind of talk about what he thought about generally kind of the world. So he said, quote, "It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. We address ourselves not to their humanity, but to their self-love, and never talk to them of our own necessities, but of their advantages." So basically, Adam Smith's view of economics and of the world generally revolved around the selfishness of individuals, right? I mean, that's one way of reading it. There's more, I guess you could say, more charitable readings of it, right? It's just the natural way things are, or whatever, right? But that's basically what's come to be known as the invisible hand, right? That there is a guiding principle in the world that all things are selfish, all things are basically everything is in a fight to survive. And so in Smith's mind, the economy basically will cover that fight for survival and lead to winners and losers in a good kind of way. Adam Smith had this idea of the invisible hand of the market, laissez-faire, right? Basically just like economics, the economic system itself would basically fix things,
The
right?
ship will self-right.
Yeah. And so the idea was that things would settle themselves out. Like you said, the ship will right itself, right? There's this idea of economic equilibrium. And in particular,
Lie.
right. And the idea that we spoke about last time, which is that the market clears. The market will clear itself, right? So if there is unemployment, it will get filled by people. Basically, the idea is that nature hates a vacuum. And so where there is opportunity, either in selling goods for less or making money or hiring more people or whatever, that the economy, the market will fix itself automatically almost.
Which sounds like it should work. Like logically, if you look at that and even somewhat scientifically, it sounds like a good idea, right?
It sounds like a fun idea.
Sounds true. Doesn't work.
Okay. But but that doesn't happen.
No.
Right?
No.
So
Ergo the class and wealth discrepancy in any nation.
Yeah. And so the big thing that caused people to disbelieve this idea of what's known as Say's law, basically, which is that aggregate production necessarily creates an equal quantity of aggregate demand. Okay? So in other words, if I make 50 iPhones, I'm going to create the demand for 50 iPhones. When you say it like that,
or get arrested.
When you when you say it like that, though, it seems obviously insane, right? Like, what do you mean? No, of course not. You can make extra stuff, and people won't want it. Like that happens all the time.
Yes,
you know.
Does. Yes, it
and
does.
So the thing that in particular caused people to start to really question this idea was the Great Depression. Okay. The Great Depression is too complicated for us to get into right now. But what happened was,
though it is the economic collapse.
Yes, right? It is the economic collapse.
That is the collapse.
Right
there. For America, at least.
That is definitely the collapse for America. We're trying to give broad strokes here, Marie. So
broad strokes, yeah.
Broad strokes. Yeah. So the Great Depression generally led people to begin to think about this idea that that the market will not clear itself. And so instead, there must be some imperfections in the adjustment mechanism of the market. And specifically, there must be rigidities and market price, what's known as stickiness. Okay? This was the work that John Maynard Keynes became so famous for, and Keynesian economics. Okay? That is that idea. So, what the idea...
and that the market itself cannot regulate itself necessarily in so much as it has to have some kind of guidance from the government as well. After the Great Depression, that was the other. If you don't have stimulus, if you don't have incentive, if you don't have sort of that type of, it's the opposite of laissez-faire. You have to have some type of governance, or else, like the New Deal, or else
you will not be able to rebuild from something like that without war, which is really, again, the other thing that brought us out.
Yeah. So the main theory that was going on, okay, was what is known as quantity theory. That was what dominated macroeconomics until basically the Great Depression. Okay. The idea here was developed mostly by Irving Fisher, but there are some other people who had parts here, but they use this general equation, okay, which is that the money supply times the money velocity is equal to the price level and the amount of real income in an economy.
How can money have velocity?
So what money velocity means is it's the frequency at which money is used in transactions. So basically, how quickly is money leaving?
Okay.
So you can think about this as it's the money supply times
it's your outgoing.
Exactly. It's output equals input, basically. Okay. So it's the money supply times the rate at which money leaves the supply is equal to the price of things that are going in and out and the amount of real income available. Okay. And now this is for macroeconomics. So this is for an entire economy.
Yes.
Okay. What they didn't take into account here in particular, and this is what made Keynes such an important person, is that money itself, in times of depression or in times of economic hardship, money becomes hoarded. And so that money velocity is not constant.
Yes.
So he said that economic output is correlated with money velocity. So people, this is a quote straight from Wikipedia here, people. So, quote, people increase their money holdings during times of economic difficulty by reducing their spending, which further slows the economy. This paradox of thrift claimed that individual attempts to survive a downturn only worsen it. When the demand for money increases, money velocity slows. A slowdown in economic activities means markets might not clear, leaving excess goods to waste and capacity to idle. So Keynes basically said that the market will actually shift the quantities of things that are being taken or put in or whatever, okay, as opposed to the speed at which prices will change or the speed at which money will actually be spent. So it was no longer that the demand and the supply basically caused each other in this weird way, and therefore the speed at which money was spent would change. Instead, what Keynes said was, no, money itself is its own good in some ways. And we need to account for people holding on to or not holding on to money in times of downturn or in times of good economic policies.
Right. And which is what, with the run on the bank, people like hoarding and keeping their money without spending it.
Absolutely. So
or,
Keynes,
supplier, what is it? Consumer confidence.
Absolutely. And that is why all that stuff became so important. So John Maynard Keynes basically set up the current view of economics that we have. It's his idea, basically, that we build off of. And there are some newer ideas as well that are out there, right? So there are ideas about how the economy has an equilibrium, right? So as we got better at mathematics, we also got better at applying mathematics to complicated systems like economics. So these equilibrium theories basically it's similar to Hunter-Prey diagrams. I don't know, Marie, if you know what those are.
I might, but for the for the listeners out there who need a refresher.
Okay, sure. So a lot of dynamic systems in nature behave like hunter and prey populations do in nature. So imagine that we were graphing or charting the amount of rabbits versus the amount of hawks inside of a forest clearing. Right? You would expect that as the amount of hawks goes up, the amount of rabbits should go down. Right? Because the hawks will eat all the rabbits. But eventually, the population of rabbits will get so low that hawks start to starve to death. And that will cause the rabbit population to increase again. Right? So if you chart them over time, then they have a dynamic relationship to each other, where the population of hawks will rise, it'll hit a maximum, and then it will decrease again and hit a minimum. And as the hawk population hits a minimum, the rabbit population hits its maximum.
Okay.
And vice versa. Okay. That kind of equation type describes chemical reactions. It describes the economy. It describes springs on the forces on springs. It describes all kinds of important systems for us in the world. Okay. What it in particular suggests, which is very fascinating, is an idea of an equilibrium state. So if you drew like the center line or the average of like the rabbit population versus the hawk population, you would find that those averages are basically in between that maximum and the minimum. And the natural system seems tuned in such a way as to keep those values within that equilibrium range. That makes sense to you?
Okay.
So like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting with these systems, though, is what if you add an impulse to that system? So, for instance, let's say because you and I, Marie, are bad people,
Uncertainty.
We
You add
decide
uncertainty to it.
Well, besides uncertainty, let's take something even more simple than that. What if we release an extra 500 hawks into the environment?
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yes.
Your population now, that impulse has put it off of equilibrium. In fact, you've broken equilibrium. You've basically added so many hawks, or you could add so many hawks, that the system will not naturally be able to right itself. And then you basically have so many hawks that all of the rabbits get eaten.
Yes. But you don't even need sort of that factor, right? Because you would even have an uncertainty of like the weather, right?
Yes.
And an economic anything, which is just in your analogy. If you have hawks, you have rabbits. The weather of what, of any given, could be just any kind of external force that's outside of a action of an action from people. That's not. I'm trying a deliberate action to make a mitigating circumstance within the market. You also have the uncertainty of like, well, what happens if there is famine? What happens if there is X? What happens is Y is going to all of a sudden change up all the variables about the hawks and the rabbits.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely, yeah, 100%. Right. So there might be a deep freeze that winter that kills all the rabbits. Right. There
Kills
might be
all the bunnies. Yes.
There might be a free, right. In really complicated systems, there's like hundreds of thousands of variables that could affect the dynamics of a system. And in an economic system, it is one of the most complex systems, right?
Yes.
So all kinds of stuff can affect it. And so that's really, in a simplified way, that is where we find ourselves today with economics, is we have these very, very complicated dynamic systems.
But if you start to trade on the complicated dynamic systems, right? That is sort of your derivatives.
Well, and so and that's where we now get to the point where.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
I got ahead of myself.
It's fine. When the economy, when these economic principles were first put into place, even by say Keynes, right? We weren't that far removed from the gold standard.
Yeah, we were hoping that things were just going to be simpler.
And so, Marie, why don't you tell us what's that big shift? What is the shift between, say, gold and fiat currency for us? Or what does it change? What does it do for us?
So gold is, again, it's fixed based on the commodity of gold, and we all understand what the commodity of gold is. Fiat is, we're going to move to almost, I want to say, like, the best way I describe it is like a faith-based system that's 100%. Saying that we have nothing that is tied to this paper or these shells or this whatever it is or these coins. It's not based on any type of commodity market that's worth anything. It is only based on what the government says its value is. And so it takes an incredible like suspension of belief
which is something that we all do anyways, to make sure that a fiat system works, which is the predominant move away from the gold market, because gold, there's only so much gold out there, and it's impossible to travel and trade with, and you have to be able to move into the fiat system, meaning something roughly equivalent to gold.
Yeah.
Right?
So,
I mean, it's sort of like right now, even extrapolating it further in the fiat system would be like a Bitcoin, right? Which is I think even one step even further removed from at least a fiat system. You can say, hey, we as America work with certain federal institutions like the Fed, and we have agreed that we will put out this much currency on paper into the market, and it's going to be worth this. And everyone says, yes, we can agree on it, and the markets will trade as such. Our financial operating system will respect it as such. But then all of a sudden you get cryptocurrency, and cryptocurrency could just throw a monkey wrench into anything and saying, hey, I am now going to take this smaller group of people, and I'm going to validate that this market is actually worth this now for this crypto coin, and start trading in it as its own fiat system, which is a derivative or a variant to American currency or any currency, which is crazy because it's a virtual currency, which even makes less sense to me. Like, my eyes start to bleed every time I start to think of the migration. Like, again, like gold, if you think about it, like gold doesn't mean anything. You can't build anything out of gold. It's shiny and pretty. Fiat, it's a huge suspension of belief, but it's like it's got a whole bunch of systems that are validating and propping it up. Bitcoin, no idea what that is. Sorry. I might be old-fashioned, but I like my folding money. But seriously, like, or even with credit, or with anything that I tend to think of it with any type of quote unquote money, which all of a sudden becomes almost circumstantial or is not based in any type of physicality, is an amazing suspension of belief for any kind of market to be able to validate and sustain.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, here's what kind of occurred. The United States had gold as its main, basically as the way that the dollar was fixed in price until the 70s, until Nixon.
No. Teddy Roosevelt said we were going to move away from the standard.
No, we moved away from the gold standard, but the value of a dollar of gold was still fixed to the value of a certain amount of dollar. Right, so the United States had the Bretton Woods system after World War II that said that gold was $35 per ounce. Okay, so the U.S. dollar was set to the price of gold still, although it was not. You could not, like, it wasn't a gold standard in the sense that the government gave gold out and then that's how money came in. Okay, but Nixon basically said we're no longer going to do that because there was a lot of problems where people were during the 60s, people were starting to trade in their dollars for gold again. And Nixon was like, we're not going to do that. There's no way. And he stopped that from happening. And instead then created the Federal Reserve, gave the charge to the Federal Reserve System that the value of U.S. dollars would be decided by them.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
So
them based on market indicators, still based on the cost of gold in some respects. Right?
Yeah, and also based on how much bonds could the government sell to people.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So it's very complicated, right? But basically it's basically this idea that the dollar is set up, or the value of the dollar, okay, is set up basically where how much money would foreign governments give for a dollar?
Yes.
Okay, and then how much do we want to say and set the price of a dollar for? All right.
Which it's also heavily reliant on how much we would say their currency is worth. Too.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Or how much debt are we willing to take in each other's currency?
Yeah. So it's at this point, the dollar is basically not anchored to anything ultimately.
No, man, we're just out there. We out there just
It is
letting our freak
well,
flag fly with our
like
money, man.
it is legitimate, and that's where a lot of these concerns about, say, economic collapse come in. All right, where people say the dollar is not tied to anything. What if the government collapses and suddenly the value of the dollar is zero? Or what if China becomes a dominant market force and they say, actually, no, we don't want dollars anymore. Right?
Yeah.
Or what if say, I mean, any number of things could occur.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so that's where the fear comes in now, that the dollar has no, it's true for all, I mean, this was true for fiat currencies before the dollar too. There is nothing tying it to anything physical. And so some people think we should go back to, say, the gold standard.
It's just kind of crazy.
Okay. So that's kind of where we are. All right.
And also, too, with markets, like I would say any kind of financial market has this huge amount of variability in it. And you're like, again, with derivatives, futures, you're basically hedging bets and trading on things that don't exist. It exists in a very hypothetical sense, and you're saying we will make money or lose money based on what could happen based on this outcome. And how much of that outcome comes true will be how much money you can perhaps realize, or even like derivatives themselves are just this crazy, and they're not meant to be understood. That's the other thing I think that gets lost in all of this. There's so much about financial institutions and markets and how we trade and how we evaluate money that people make complicated.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
companies make that more difficult than it should be because then you don't know what's going on.
Well, so okay, a big part of how the dollar gets set in its price, and a big part of the way that the value of like the market itself is determined is the government will issue government bonds, and what those are low, or they're rather they're very, very low risk, or they're considered very low risk items that I will put out. Say I'm a government, I'll say I'll give you. You can buy a bond for $100, and in 50 years, I will give you, whatever, $115, let's say, right? Yeah. That's a crazy high yield, but let's say I did it. Okay?
Yeah.
A lot of people would buy that. The government would get funded at the moment, and in 50 years, you would be able to say, well, I have this government bond, it's low risk, and I expect that in 50 years, I'm going to then bring in $115 on every $100 I spent for the government.
Right.
The
it's
reason
basically stock in the country.
It is. And the reason the government does is it says, look at how many people expect the government to last 50 years. Great, right? And it builds confidence in the value of the dollar. It builds confidence in the say of the government itself. So that's a really important way that the money or that the economy gets built. Now, on top of that, though, there are very high risk vehicles, which is what Marie was talking about just now, like derivative products, right? So one of my favorites was what's known as a butterfly swap. Basically what that is it's two big banks decide to trade risk with each other, and they both have different computer systems and equations that determine volatility or the risk of their, say, stock or whatever they're buying. And so they'll trade it to each other to lower each other's relative risk. Now, we talked in the first episode about risk generally, where we said, like, I loan money to Betty, but Betty is really good at paying back her debts, and I know Betty has a solid job. So I consider that to be very low risk. But let's say that I've also traded money to Billy, and Billy is a drunkard who doesn't pay his debts at all.
Deadbeat.
Okay, Billy's a deadbeat.
Right.
Well, the amount of money I loaned to Billy, I might not ever get that back. There's a good chance I won't, so it's very high risk. So what would make sense from my point of view, if I could trick them into doing it, or convince them into doing it, I guess, is what if I told what if I was able to trade some of the amount of money that I owe or that Betty owes me and say, well, actually now, Betty, I want you to be owed by Billy instead. So Betty owes me $50. Billy owes me $20. I'll say, you know what, Billy? Instead of you giving me $20, you give it to Betty. And Betty,
Yes.
you give me $40. Right?
Yes.
So I'm giving the risk to Betty for $10. She's making $10 on it. I'm still
Yes.
getting back my $40, and Billy gets to keep drinking. Assuming that wasn't his last $20 or whatever, $10.
Right. Even if it was, how much you go into debt could be traded.
Yes.
Right?
So
how poor your debt is, and what's the likelihood of getting paid off? Because the payoff of that dollar is still that hypothetical payback is still worth something. Even if Billy is like pretty much drunk under the bar stool, if there's a chance he's going to pay somebody back, that money is valued
still out there
at something.
yeah, and so that's
Yes.
actually partly
Crazy.
why there seems to be a point at which you can be so rich that you can never go bankrupt or you can never go broke.
Right.
Because you are in so hard to so many people for so much money that it makes sense for them to continue to loan you money just to get rid of their own risk than it does for them to call your debt and have all that money go away.
This is also known as too big to fail.
Yes, exactly. So the economy went from being so, even 50 years ago, 60 years ago.
I gotta go. You gotta go. We'll trade goats.
Right.
How simple that was.
Being so simple to being
Mhm.
complicated to the point that the people making the trades at the major banking institutions don't even know what they're ultimately like. They're not trading anything. They're trading how scared they are that they're gonna go bankrupt.
Yes. Or even better, how soon will another country go bankrupt?
Right.
How soon will, whatever they're doing take effect into a different market? Or
Yeah.
but I mean, we're talking in very huge general terms. Like derivatives could be small little bits and pieces. I can't even think of a good equivalent, like a good metaphor. It's like the crumbs that you find under the sofa could be swept together, and that's a derivative market because there's no human hand driving a lot of the derivative markets. It's all algorithms.
Right.
So like one of my absolute favorite stories comes from a Frontline, which is on, I want to say, oh my God, National Public Radio, public broadcast has Frontline, and it's on the financial market. It came out, I want to say, some years ago now, and it talks about the bubble and what happened and and all of these different sort of factors that drove us towards the 2008 crash. And one of the things was the derivative market, and that we really didn't understand what we were doing, because if you were a certain type of trader within sort of a Bear Stearns or Goldman Sachs or any of the big firms, all you had to do to create a new derivative was pushing a certain program through your computer. And so they called them I think it was F8 or F9 monkeys. I was an F9 monkey, and you're creating a derivative market that you are encouraging a country, an individual, any type of market to buy into.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even understand the full ramifications of what you're doing, because there's it's not existing in any real terminology or any real world. And it's like the amount of complication that we decided to put ourselves to bear and put other countries to bear is staggering. And watching that episode, if you have a chance to, anything on Frontline is really, really good. But this was like, I got done with it, and I just I just curled up with my piggy bank and wept.
Yeah, it's pretty scary.
Anyways, but again, but there's it is an emotional reaction, because they even say this in the Frontline episode, is
you're banking on the fact that somebody doesn't know what you're doing. Like that type of obscurity and that type of confidence, and it being a confidence game, is a part of any kind of market. You will believe that this will make money because I tell you that it makes money because I'm an accredited institution, and all of my portfolio trades on Moody for 5 stars or whatever it is. Like it's highly valued, right? So you have all these other auxiliary things propping it up that's saying, hey, no, this is real, right? If one of those things starts to teeter, the whole thing can come down in a lot of ways. It is a pretty nuanced house of cards.
It is extremely complicated and just fascinating. In my opinion, it's very fascinating.
It is.
So, all right. So, it's a house of cards. It all is gonna come crashing down.
Nothing like a little fear up in there. Huh,
no, right? So probably the most important, probably one of the most important ones that came after the financial crisis was the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act.
Yes.
Which is so tremendously ginormous.
Yes.
That it's hard to fully understand. Okay? But
yes.
The basic idea was to try to stop the things that had caused the Great Recession. Right? It was the idea that that you can't be. It's so complicated, Marie, that it is hard to understand.
Basically, how I understand it is, if you are a bank, you cannot be a trading institution. So if you are a bank and you have a group of people that have that are holding money with you, you cannot have a separate arm that is trying to take that money from them necessarily.
Yes.
It's this separation to keep everything above board, to try and rectify what happened with subprime. Right? So it's trying to say, hey, if you're a bank, you can't be doing this stuff. And that lasted and it was a very important, I think it was very important because it did try and restructure and reaffirm some confidence that, again, that these two things should be held separately.
Yeah.
But it also lasted for like a hot minute. Like they repealed Dodd-Frank as quickly as it came.
They did. Now, one of the important things that it did bring into the idea or the public viewpoint, though, is that banks should probably be required to hold a certain amount of capital on hand, that if they do fail, or if they do make a bunch of bad bets and things go terribly, they will not completely destroy the economy by failing themselves.
Which, again, is common sense. You should not write checks your butt can't cash.
Yeah,
right?
But that's basically the idea.
All right, let's talk about Ruin. Let's just get straight to it.
Okay.
Let's just F this MNFer all up.
Okay, so I got a couple of websites here, Marie. I'm going to read to you. Okay. This is what I want to do. I want to read to you some of these guides, and I want your opinion on them. Okay?
Awesome.
Okay, so this is from thebalance.com. It's titled, very helpfully, U.S. Economy Collapse, What Will Happen, How to Prepare.
Okay.
Good. It's by Kimberly Amadeo.
Do I need to know anything about her? Yeah, where's she from?
Yeah, so she has a 20-year senior-level corporate experience in economic analysis and business strategy. She received a Master's of Science in Management from the Sloan School of Business at MIT. Okay. So she's pretty... It seems like she's pretty good.
Yeah, she's no Krugman, but she's okay. Keep going.
She's fine. Okay.
Okay.
All right. When would the U.S. economy collapse? She says... Any of the 6 following scenarios could create an economic collapse.
Ooh,
1.
6. Okay.
If the U.S. dollar rapidly loses value, it would create hyperinflation.
Okay.
Yep. Could be.
Yeah. Could
right?
be. Well, yeah. Again, yes.
The
Fed would have to do that, and it would have to be a reason for it. Yes.
Yeah. 100%.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. There would have to be a bank run, could force banks to close or even go out of business, cutting off lending and even cash withdrawals. Okay, yeah, could be. Those are kind of the classic ones. right? Okay.
There's a run on the bank. It's kind of it's your big it's the greatest hits.
Yeah.
Yeah,
3.
sorry.
The internet could become paralyzed with a super virus, preventing emails and online transactions.
Oh well, that's gonna be that's a whole bigger thing too.
Yeah.
Right?
But that's fascinating because we don't realize all of banking gets done online now. It's not like phone calls and stuff like that anymore. And even phone calls are on cell phones, right? So yeah, that could be a problem.
Did you really quick? Have you watched Mr. Robot?
No.
Oh my God! All right, people, we're great. You're learning a lot. Y'all need to go and watch. It's up to its 4th season. It's about that basically. It is amazingly good. Great.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Oh my God, so good. Okay, sorry. Keep going.
No, it's no problem at all. Okay. There's terrorist attacks or a massive oil embargo could halt interstate trucking. Grocery stores would soon run out of food.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see that.
I don't know about that.
You don't like that one?
Well, so that's sort of a slow moving. I would think that would be part of some other bigger thing happening, right? Because it's an embargo on oil wouldn't stop trucking for some time, and that would be something that would be. I mean, I don't know. Again, it depends on how much of your food you're getting from other places. There's a lot to that seems like that doesn't. That would slow it down, but I don't know. Again, I'm certain that this person from MIT maybe has thought this through a little bit more than I have. But I'm just saying, I give that one maybe a 40%, 30 to 40%.
It's good. It's good stuff. Okay. There is widespread violence erupts across the nation. This could range from inner-city riots, a civil war, or a foreign military attack. It's possible that a combination of these events could overwhelm the government's ability to prevent or respond to a collapse. Maybe.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that one happening.
Yeah.
Stand with that.
There is also, so this is my favorite because I think it's kind of crazy. Some believe the Federal Reserve, the president, or an international conspiracy are driving the United States towards economic ruin.
What?
If that's the case, the economy could collapse in as little as a week. That's because it's run on confidence that debts will be repaid, food and gas will be available when you need it, and that you'll get paid for this week's work. If a large enough piece of that stops for even several days, it creates a chain reaction that leads to a rapid collapse. You don't like it?
Yeah, well, again, yeah, I think, yes. I think, so if something happens, you have a big enough turn in people's, it's like we were saying, it's all a confidence game. If you stop believing in the market will fail. But for everything that you have, so why would the Bank of the Federal Reserve want to tank the market? That's the other thing I don't understand. Why would a government want to tank its own market?
So here's the thing.
What,
here's
to buy it out again cheaper? That to me is
because the lizards are finally hatched and they're ready to take over. The lizards,
right? I mean, that's a lot to that, right? It's
that's the part of this that we keep missing too. Is that gold is inherently valuable because the lizard people need it for their ship. It's completely why.
I mean, dude, that's sort of remedial, don't you think?
Hundo percento, Marie.
That goes
solid. Take that one to the bank.
Take that one to Fort Knox, babies.
The one I like about this, the part that I like about this one though is, to me, it actually doesn't even matter if that's actually true. I would like to propose a 7th thing that could cause an economic collapse, maybe.
Okay.
And I'm being serious here. I think this actually could be a big deal. Okay.
All right.
So much of the market is based on confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Forget what if the government means to actually do that, to actually collapse the economy.
Mm-hmm.
What if we trick enough people into believing that that's the case? There's 20% of the population believes in conspiracy theories?
Yes,
right?
But how much money do they have in the bank to take a run on it? And how influential is that population to create that trigger?
I think that we are vastly underestimating the ability of that population to cause some crap. I'm dead serious. Like, I'm dead serious here. I think that we are vastly underestimating it. They don't define the market, right? They don't define any of that stuff, but they're the ones buying things, right? They're the ones that, because again, it doesn't even have to be that a huge number of them decide to pull all their money out of the bank or whatever. It doesn't have to be any of that kind of stuff. Okay.
Right. You just have to have them believe it.
All I'm saying is, what if it creates such instability in the American political system or the American social system or whatever that other governments decide, you know what, the United States isn't worth dealing with. That's the part of this that I think is actually quite fascinating.
So I'm gonna disagree with that, only in the respect that I think my theory would be the flip side, which is all it would take would be one quasi-major institution to go out, like a Bank of America, or again, like a Lehman Brothers. When Lehman Brothers went out, that's when, stuff got really fast. That's when foreign markets started to be like, this is now your major perceived financial institutions are failing. The thing that it was too big to fail is failed. It's starting to fail. And I think that, like, again, the whole idea behind it was them saying, no, go ahead, let Lehman Brothers go down, because again, the market will right itself. There's, if this is going to happen, we have to take it in and adjust to it. And as soon as it happened, everything hit the fan, and that's when, like, again, that confidence began to crumble. I think it would take if something like that happened, it would be a much faster fall than a smaller consumer base that leans towards conspiracy. Is because, again, like, the conspiracist, that market is already, because how does that market, and how does the 20% that believe in that, what sway or what tie do they have to a federal institution to make that valid? Do you know what I mean? It's like, they don't believe in the federal government anyways.
That's the thing. They don't have to believe in the federal government.
Okay.
In fact, it might be better if they don't.
Right.
All that they would need to do is start to become violent, would be to start to become to vote in people in power that are conspiracy minded like they are, to basically do things like with I just see I just think that I think it's a more interesting or a more worthy discussion. I don't think we ever thought that, say, and again, regardless of what you think of Donald Trump or not as president.
I was going to say,
right?
Regardless of what you think of Bruce Springsteen.
Regardless of what you think of Bruce Springsteen.
His early work. Oh my God. Come on.
No.
Born in the USA? Are you kidding me?
Regardless.
Did Dora have that album? Dora had that album.
No. I don't know, actually. Maybe.
She totally had that album.
She probably does.
I got that for my album. I got that album from my mother for Christmas, and she still has it.
Interesting.
Oh my God.
Interesting.
I'm sorry. Keep going.
It's okay.
You were basically, regardless on
regardless of what
regardless
of what your belief is on how the current administration is doing or not, I don't think it's a far stretch to say that 5 years ago no one would have thought Donald Trump would be president. Seriously, right? 10 years ago no one would have thought Donald Trump would be president. And that was one of the biggest questions when he came in was, oh my God, what is this going to do to the markets? Right? I don't think it would take very much for, again, a population of people who think that they're unheard, or who don't think that the federal government is important, or that economics are important, or whatever, to cause political upheaval. I think that's one of the big things that we did not take into account during this last election, is how powerful those kind of forgotten voices can be when they all get together, right? So to me, the idea of an economic collapse, I mean, it's super far-fetched, right? It's not going to happen. Like, I wouldn't be worried about it at all. But I think that that's probably more likely
But if you
than...
were going to worry... No.
I think it's more likely that... I think it's more likely, like, a soft revolution or a soft coup or whatever.
Really?
I mean, you read some of these books that are coming out now. A soft coup is not far off, it sounds like.
A
Right,
soft coup. That's great. Yeah, did you read that somewhere, or is that something that you just
I
came up
did.
with?
No, I totally have read it many times, all over the internet. But
Dang,
you know,
seriously?
so that's kind of
Good.
that's kind of where I guess I would think that some of these things are maybe a little bit more. And it's
See?
interesting because the economic collapse ideas are generally a more like a lot of these kind of survivalist sort of things. They're more tinged with, let's say, like libertarian leanings, right? They're people that think they don't need the government or they shouldn't need the government or whatever. And I kind of feel that in many ways I would like my family to be self-sufficient as well. You know what I mean? Just because I think that's
You,
a
Katie
worthy thing
Seaborg
to be.
and Chippy?
Absolutely. We live a life of luxury, but we live it independently, Marie. But you know, I think.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think?
No, I still disagree with you. I think so. I do think. Okay, so Black Swan Anonymous. Oh my God, Anonymous. Oh, sorry. You get what I'm saying. That this 2016 was definitely something that certain people did expect, or said could happen, but it did not. It was not something that was anticipated. But I think you are seeing in general that what happens when something like this happens is you have sort of this inherent disruption, right? In the market, in government, in whatever it is. Institution and the idea of institution and the idea of what are the things that we've put in place that are going to hold are tested. And to me, I am guardedly optimistic that if a small population pushed hard enough for whatever it was, that things would hold based on, one, self-preservation, and two, which is not necessarily a good thing, but then also that democracy that they have in place and the financial institutions that they have in place, if they cannot be litmus tested and there aren't things in place to hold, then they'll go down. But I'm going to bet that they will hold.
See now, so this is kind of what I think, right? So, or where I guess I would kind of push back a little bit is this time. I think, I mean, generally in the American political system, the difference between a deep red conservative versus a deep blue liberal on the economy ultimately are minimal in terms of their, and let's say not say liberal, but Democrat versus Republican, economically basically the same thing in many ways, right? Our Democrats are more conservative than the conservatives of other European parties when it comes to economics.
Yes.
So in that case, in this instance, then, even with, say, the disruption of, say, someone complete outsider coming in and becoming president, the effect on the market was minimal because ultimately it's the same kind of people running the Fed, running the, you know what I mean? Like, the people in charge of the economy, the disruptions here are more social than they are economic. You know what I'm saying?
That is until the government begins to shake that tree, right? Shake
Sure.
the economic tree with things like tariffs.
And tariffs, right. Well, okay,
or all
okay.
sorts of things.
100%, right? So what I'm saying is...
Good, bad, or indifferent. Like,
right.
Yes.
That's another impulse. That's another impulse to that predator-prey relationship. That'll make a change.
Yes.
What I'm saying is that right now that equilibrium is holding, but how far... Like, the difference between an equilibrium holding and an equilibrium just going over the edge to the point of no return, you don't realize you're at the point of no return until you're there. It can happen so quickly. And so that's kind of the point that I think is interesting is I wonder, and if any listeners are economists or know any of this kind of stuff, whatever, I honestly, I would love to hear from you and maybe even have you on the show to talk
Oh
about
my God, yeah.
what are the protections.
If anyone out there knows anything about economy,
the thing that we spoke 3 episodes about. No,
I mean, it's not that we're not experts, but if somebody actually, like maybe took a class on this, I'd be really cool. I'd be totally into hearing about it.
well, okay. What I'm saying is, like, what are those? I
Back
guess
to the lizard people. Sorry.
what are those protections that keep equilibrium in place? Do you know what I'm saying?
Well,
In the
I think
case of,
it's the exact same opposite thing that throws it over, right? It's confidence. It's like with any system. And I look back at 2008. 2008, we were really close. There's no rational way that should have self-righted. I mean, even with like confidence about like, I think if you look back and you took public opinion at the time, they're like, yeah, let the bank fail. Let it fail, because then, it's karma, it's justice, it's whatever. And other Americans were like, no, we can't let that happen because of X, Y, and Z. So it's like, I feel like we were really close then, and we had sort of that push and pull then. And I think it really will come to what that factor is. And I don't know if we'll see that factor. That factor may be some insurgency by an internal population. It may be a natural disaster. It could be a cyber attack. It could be a whole bunch of different things. So I think you're right. I think it could be some event, but I think for any time you have one of these things trigger, you automatically, and again, maybe this is just my confidence and faith, is that they're like, no, there's systems within our government that go into reaction mode on it. And again, sometimes that's not good. Sometimes you come out of a system going into reaction with something like Spectrum or like NSA or, something that overcompensates. But then other times you have people that are, in the position to be able to try and rectify that. And that's not to say, too, that the American government hasn't taken a lot of oversteps within the financial market as well. So, I don't know. I don't have a good answer. Buy gold. Hoard it.
hoard gold till the lizards come, and then trade
gold
them for your neighbor's
and
safety.
Bury it like pirates.
Good stuff. All right. Well, Marie, this has been a fascinating topic series. All of it. I loved it. I had a great time.
I did too. And again, dear viewers, if there's anybody out there that has an opinion on this, or even a learned one at that, learn it or not, we're all there for it.
Yeah, we love it. We love hearing from listeners. Please let us know. And we'll be back next week with our first episode in a long series, Marie, on demons.
I got to tell you, first of all, I'm just going to say my mother and your mother are not happy about this. I know my mom's not thrilled.
About demons?
Yeah.
Why?
This isn't cool. This isn't because really? Do you want to ask why? Because we're going to be talking to demons and demonology.
My mom comes over our house and she's like, "I just thank God every day you haven't, you're not wearing a cape." That's what my mom's happy about. She's like, whatever. It's fine. Just you're not full blown yet. That's all that matters. You're not straight up like Anton LaVey,
see, Dora, demons. Even my husband was like, all right, if you're gonna do, okay, because can I tell just really quick? Not allowed when I was pregnant with our daughter. Not allowed to watch The Exorcist.
Really?
He refused. Like I was like, oh, it's on. And again, like I don't, I love me the horror. I've watched it before. Oh, it's on. He's like, no. I'm like, why? And he's like, because you're pregnant. I'm like, what the heck is that about? I'm like, baby, you are not. First of all, we don't go to church.
No,
we're not that religious.
No,
he's like, no. And it happened like twice, and even to this day, he's like, no, absolutely not. And I'm like, is there any kind of rational, reasonable? It is a Hollywood movie, and he's like, I don't care. You don't invite that into your home. You don't welcome. And I'm like, we're watching The Exorcist on Netflix, dude. Like, what are you on about? But seriously, so. I got a lot of people that are like, oh, great. That's fine, Marie. Why don't you just get out the Ouija board?
My mom,
goat's blood.
We'll have to do a listener video and show the listeners how our house is decorated all year round with etchings from Dante's Inferno. But like if anyone is inviting it into their lives, it is my wife and I, and it hasn't happened yet. It's like a little experiment I do. Nothing's happened.
Nothing's happened yet, but I'll tell you what, if and when you decide to get a puppy or a kid or something, you're not allowed to watch The Exorcist. Paul will know. Husband will know. He'll come over and he'll be like, turn it off!
I'm more
Turn
afraid
it off and get a priest in here.
I'm more afraid of Paul and you than Azazel or whatever. Jeez.
As well you should be. He was downright serious. I was like, why are you still here? Go get me some cobbler. And he's like, fine, but we're not watching The Exorcist.
Get me
Anyways,
some cobbler. All right.
get me some cobbler.
Dear listeners, thank you so much for listening to the show. We'll be back next week with our episode on demons. Please, if you haven't yet, go check out Whatever Remains, Marie's podcast. It is awesome. The series is going great. How many do you have left here, Marie?
Oh, excellent question. So I had one until this week, and then everything just sort of flared up again with speculation of what's causing it, who's causing it. So this episode that should be coming out within the next couple of days is about the doctor who was the first responder in Havana. And so he is the person who has made all of the initial diagnosis that has driven everything up to this point. And it's, to me, what I learned and what I found out is interesting. And and I hope you guys listen to it. I think we got maybe another one or two, and then we're going to solve it, put a bow in it, and then send it over to the administration and let them deal with it.
Right. Nice. Good stuff. I'm excited.
Yeah.
All right, cool. We'll go check and listen to that, and we will be back next week.
Bye.
Bye.